televised meeting.
Welcome to the regular briefing of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. We are briefing today for December 1st. Hard to believe that we're that far into it, but this will be the last meeting before December 1st. Of course, we won't be here Thursday for Thanksgiving. And all of the commissioners are healthy, here, and ready to, as they say in radio, rock and roll. And I hope this goes very well for everybody. And speaking of rock and roll, I'll turn it over to the star of the show, Dudley Watts.
Okay, I thought you were going to say the real star of the show, the Vice Chairman, Don Martin. So,
well, we're going to do that right after you finish.
Okay. Well, I can certainly kind of put things in context. Basically, what we have today and what we've been working on vigorously has been recognizing that our year end's coming, and December 1st will be the last meeting until we have our organizational meeting on December 5th. And so there's been a lot of effort to try to get kind of old business items closed up. And so it's a little bit unusual. We've got the briefing agenda to review today, but we also have some discussion items which we've kind of pulled out of that so we can talk about first, and really with a decision of do we want to put something on the agenda for action on December 1st? And so that's sort of the thematically the part of it for today. And so the first one is Forsyth Humane Society. As you know, we had received notification from the Humane Society that they gave us notice of termination of that contract, and we've been in negotiations with them about what it would take to continue for them to provide that service, given their financial realities. And we've had some great discussions. Folks in budget and Damon Sanders Pratt have been super involved in kind of all parts of that. And so as we met and discussed it last week, what we tried to do is we want to communicate kind of where we're off in terms of the negotiations. So I think Kimberly Bussey from Budget's going to come up, and she's going to show our effort to really kind of stratify the cost associated with running that shelter, and then we've assigned responsibilities. And no matter what happens here with the negotiations, I think we're in a better place moving forward to really talk contractually about who does what across the different services. And so let me get Ms. Bussey to show you what she's put together. You also have information in front of you while you're pulling that up. You've got an email from Mr. Neff that really talks about, in a lot of detail, around the medical cost that has been a big part of that. And so I'll also just bring that to your attention. So, Ms. Bussey.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Dudley said we'll just give a brief update for where we are.
Is that microphone on? Check our microphone.
And this, you should have in front of you as well this presentation, along with the email from Mr. Neff concerning the medical services. So as Dudley mentioned, just a brief overview of where we are today. The Humane Society did request to terminate the agreement. The Forsyth County Humane Society requested a contract increase to $1.85 million for the calendar year 23. Staff proposed an alternate amount to the Humane Society of $1.08 for the fiscal year 24. The Humane Society spoke with some donors and stakeholders and have decided that they can continue with services for a contract amount of $1.5. So that's sort of where we are today. Discussions have been around this pretty firm request from the Humane Society at 1.5 and the county's discussions at this 1.08. So in order to take a look at where we are in negotiations, we've had a little breakdown of the services. And so we've taken the budget information that the Humane Society has provided, so some salaries and some other expenditure categories and information, and tried to aggregate those in a way that puts them into 4 categories so we can better discuss who's responsible for what type of service as we move forward. And so those 4 categories that you'll see in a moment are management, medical, foster and adoptions, and custody and care. So these categories were used to take a look at both the alternate proposal from the county of 1.08 and the Humane Society request of 1.5 to get, again, a better understanding of what the services are. So this first slide is going to be a breakdown of the Humane Society expenditures with that alternate proposal. Again, if you see at the bottom, this is the total amount that would be paid by Forsyth County is 1.08. This sort of takes the column in gray, which are the expenses. Again, we've taken all of his expenditures and put them in those 4 buckets, in their management, medical, foster, and shelter, and broken them out into the 2 columns to its right for the Forsyth Humane Society and for Forsyth County. In this scenario, Forsyth County does share some of the management expenses that we would take maybe a manager and then 1 assistant, and the Humane Society would cover the other assistant. This assumes that medical costs are shared 50-50. Foster, volunteer, and adoptions, Humane Society would take those costs, and the county would take the bulk, or rather all of the shelter, custody, and care costs. So this is a breakdown of very clear services for this 1.08 million that we've been discussing to this point. The next slide you see is a breakdown of Humane Society services, or expenditures rather, from where the Humane Society is at this point. So in this scenario, Forsyth County picks up all of the management costs, all of the medical costs. That's a non-negotiable item. They feel very strongly that they need this level of care to provide for the outcomes that they've seen to this point. They would take the cost for the foster volunteers, and we would pick up the full shelter and custody and care. So this is really lends to the request from the Humane Society of 1.5. Just when we've seen this chart in a few ways to this point, this next slide just talks about the budget implications for the options that have been on the table. Again, that top line in green is the total request of 1.85. This just gives an idea of that first column is how much we would pay to the Humane Society. That second column is what the fiscal year 23 adopted budget was for total animal services. And that next column is what the budget would be for this scenario. And then there at the end, it's the percent increase over where we started in the budget this fiscal year, in fiscal year 23. So this is a percent increase over that amount, just to give you an idea of where we are.
And that includes the sheriff's?
That's total enforcement
All in.
and care. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it kind of puts what would go to the Humane Society in perspective with our total animal services budget. And the next slide, again, that's up for your discussion, but also today we hope to talk about an option for a transition out of, if that comes to be that we need some time maybe to transition the management and custody care from the Humane Society to Forsyth County. The Humane Society has offered to continue services for an additional 3 months to ease this transition at their $1.5 million request. So that would be a total of $375,000 to get us through March 31st in the spring of 23.
And that would be staff recommendation, despite whether or not we come to terms on continual operation of the shelter, we would recommend that, and actually need to get this in front of you in one of the December meetings, but kind of a head nod that this will be okay, just to get us through that period.
That's the end of the presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions or comments?
It's clear. That was very, very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is Mr. Neff here?
They are. So Mr. Neff's here. If you've got any questions for him, he is prepared to step up.
If you would, for the benefit of people watching television, give us your name and address.
Absolutely. My name is Mark Neff, Forsyth Humane Society on Country Club Road. Thank you, Commissioners, for taking the time to Looking forward with additional questions, and I'm happy to answer anything I can for y'all.
I want to ask a question about something you said, I think, about a week and a half ago. Maybe it was the first meeting where you spoke to us in public. And there was some discussion about future cost, because basically the services you're providing are sort of way in excess of what had been done, it's grown to. I mean, the Humane Society has grown into a much larger, sort of cost model that even you all did not know you had grown into, but has grown into that. But you did mention, you made a comment about the things that you're doing, particularly in the spay and neuter activity and other things, would actually over time begin to reduce cost.
That is correct, sir.
And I think someone here asked the question about, well, how much that might be, and I really don't remember what you said. But do you remember what you said on that about how long it would take to reduce cost?
So I didn't give a specific date and time because unfortunately, there is no way to predict what the intake is going to be. What we're seeing in 2022 is we have a 20% intake increase coming into the shelter. But by providing spay-neuter resources, we know that we're reducing the number of animals next year that will potentially come in. So the goal is to continue to spay-neuter, provide the services to the community to reduce that intake. We know that in shelters that have successfully implemented these programs, they have achieved a higher saving and they've reduced the number of intakes coming in over a course of a couple of years period of time.
So I just had a thought literally this morning.
Yes.
Is that, if we basically, what would, and this kind of gets at your sort of confidence level, and I've not spoken to this with anybody here. I mean, it's not been spoken, so it is just my question and my sort of, I'm interested in your reaction, is that if we paid the full amount of the medical services, did the whatever it translates to, 1.5 million, whatever it is, if we, over the next 5 years, what if we could adjust for inflation, but from today's dollars, go from 1.5 this year, 1.4 the next year, and maybe 1.3 maybe the next year, and in a 5-year period, that would be 5 years for things to get, intakes to reduce, we'd be back to 1 million. Would you entertain such a thought as that as a contract?
I would always entertain that. Again, our sincere endeavor is to continue to provide these resources to the community. And the only way to be able to get to the place where we're reducing the intake is to have these services in place. So for every single animal that you spay neuter, it's that many less that are going to come back into the shelter next year. So those are pivotal services within our community that will eventually bring that intake number down. So we certainly, and again, that's the goal here, is to continue these conversations yearly so that as expenses decrease, the contract price decreases. We don't want any more than what it takes to actually run that business. So we would strongly entertain seeing that contract number reduce as the need decreases.
Well, I'll ask my colleagues here if they'd sort of think about how they feel about that type of contract. The issue, I think, from our standpoint, would want to sort of tie into a contract over a 5-year period some guaranteed reductions. So, I mean, like the 1.5, 4, 3, 2, 1 down to 1. And maybe you all can go back and give a little thought to that idea of whether you would entertain such a contract like that, and would you do it? Then that gives us a chance to maybe do a little thinking about that. Because I think, as I understand it, there's been some staff conversations with you, particularly about, sort of some split in the difference between the 1.08, basically that we are sort of offer to continue, with the difference, the idea of splitting the medical 50-50 on the medical. And it's my understanding you've said no. And I'm kind of interested there. I mean, if there was interest in going to some other split on that, I understand you said no also. So, I mean, are you saying that you would entertain, if we didn't look at that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1.5 to 1 million idea, but you would not entertain any reductions, any different split 1/3, 2/3 on the medical costs, some kind of way to, it also gives you all a little skin in on the medical cost piece to get at it. Some other kind of split other than 50/50.
So I appreciate that question, and I appreciate giving the opportunity to be heard that we are certainly not being difficult or unreasonable in the request. As we looked at that original ask of 1.85, we did go back to our stakeholders to bring another $350,000 to the table, again, to fund some of these program costs that you as commissioners indicated that you were uncomfortable paying with. When we look at the medical component, and you all have that, I shared with you this weekend what the average cost of those medical pieces would be. And Dr. Martin, I took your recommendation, and again, I reviewed the information within the community. I looked at the local veterinarian community to see what those average costs are. And I was able to show that it would actually cost $1.3 million to the county if you were to outsource to the local veterinarians, if they had capacity, which they don't, the spay-neuter for this community. And without spay-neuter, we're not going to see those numbers reduce. And it's not that we're being unreasonable in not negotiating that medical piece. The medical that we've quoted in there is the base medical that is defined by the Department of Ag, defined by the standards that we have as far as just being able to release those animals safely back into the public. They must be rabies vaccinated. They must have checks as far as communicable diseases. They do need to have that spay neuter. We'll never see those issues start to come backwards in our community. So again, we're certainly willing to explore a contract that looks at, as intake reduces, the fee associated to that is reduced as well. You know, FHS is putting $600,000 of this nonprofit budget into the Forsyth County piece of this. So, I mean, we certainly have some skin in the game. I mean, personally, I've got to raise $600,000 to make sure that we can stay in that operation there in addition to this contract piece. So I definitely think that we've, shown to this board here that, we are committed to making that work if we're willing to come forward with that much money and ask that from both our stakeholders and our donors.
That's good. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Any other questions?
Vice Chairman, I do have some comments.
Yes.
Thank you again for being here in the presentation from Kim today.
Absolutely.
After the conversation that we had and relative in terms of District A, where we deal a lot with people, we're in a recession, so it's really hard for me because we have just as many homeless people that I'm having to contend with.
Yes, ma'am.
As animals, right?
Yep.
So with the plan of the $350,000 that you came up with in less than a week, how did you get there?
So I just recently got back from a trip where I met with some of the national grant companies and explained to them the situation that I'm in here right now in Forsyth County. The landscape of animal welfare is very different than in 2017. And there's a very strong commitment from these grant partners to be successful in these communities. And when we look at North Carolina and when we look at the work that's been done here in Forsyth County, we don't want to go backwards. And so my commitment to them was I would deliver on those pieces. Their commitment would be to help offset this foster piece until we can get folks within the community, folks within this board to recognize the value and the strength of that piece. Because without it, we would step backwards as far as the life-saving piece. And to your point, I understand that the component around people, I genuinely do. So much of the work that we do is directly related to people. It's not just about the dogs and cats. We know the value that these animals provide folks and our goal is to continue to support these programs that will be able to help that. So
Sure. And in knowing that, I'm so glad that you said that, knowing that we're in a recession.
Yes, ma'am.
And because for me, when I looked at this budget, there seemed to be some unwillingness to reduce costs for your program and your salaries. So that's a difficult place for me to be at the 1.5. So some considerations around the 1, I think that there was possibly some promising support around that, but the 1.5 was a bit hard for me, and I'm speaking for me, like Don was able to speak for himself. That would be kind of difficult for us. But knowing that you had the capability to go and get those funds for $350,000, I trust and believe that you'll be able to continue to do that work, even if we decided not to do this. Fair enough?
I
All
appreciate
right,
that.
then. Thank you for allowing me to share my thoughts.
I appreciate it. I guess the question I might also pose to this group is as we look at the 1.5 ask of Forsyth Humane Society, we have yet to look at what it would actually cost the county to provide those services. So if you remove some of these, what will the ultimate fee to the county be for performing that? Will it be 1.5? Will it be 1.4? What would be the difference in what it would actually cost Forsyth County to do it versus Forsyth Humane Society to do it? So that, I guess that would be one question I would ask of you all as we're thinking about this process is, again, as the person that's inlaid in the process and the budgeting piece of it, I can assure you there's no frivolous expense that's on those bottom lines. As a nonprofit, we monitor every single dollar. And I don't think that we could get away with doing it less in our county unless we significantly increased the euthanasia rate. And I guess that would be the question for the community is, what is that acceptable number?
And it's not just an acceptable number, it's acceptable level of service.
Right.
Because basically you have your standards, your level of service, and this is the only way it can be. And I can assure you, it can be a different way. And that's making different choices. I think just privately, we were talking about, there's one way to deal with budget issues and raise more money, certainly, and the other way is to reduce cost. And I've seen zero effort to talk about that. The assumption is it cannot be less. And I guess my assumption is if we were going to run it, it would be less, is my assumption.
I would say that if in fact that were the case, if there was zero effort to do that, we wouldn't have come back to the table with $350,000 more out of our pocket. There is an option to reduce those pieces and to look at those. And that's exactly what we're doing is how do we, as an organization, make sure that we're maintaining tight fiduciary responsibilities, which is what we've done, in understanding that that was a program piece for you all that didn't. As I outlined in the medical component, there's nothing frivolous in that piece to you. And I was very mindful to provide documentation to every piece of that. Those are the base minimum. As far as the medical goes. I did not include dewormers and flea and tick and heartworm treatments or any of those types of things in those breakdowns to you, because again, that's the piece of the puzzle that's the above and beyond that Forsyth Humane Society takes care of. We are certainly not asking the county to have that standard, but what's outlined in that cost proposal to you is the bare essentials. And the only alternative to those essentials is to decrease the number that are saved. There isn't another service available that could be reduced out of there.
I hear you. I got you.
Additional comments, questions? Okay, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
So to close this out, I think what I heard is Mr. Neff's going to work with his board to bring kind of an alternate, longer-term proposal back. In the interim, we will go ahead and, if it's satisfactory with the board, go ahead and put an extension of this into January, February, and March so that we can continue the discussion, but also at the same time be thinking through a transition that makes sense. So, all right, so we will do that. Second item that we had is really an update on the Lockton study, and again, we're trying to work through some old business. This has been around for a little bit. We are not sure we're at a place where we're ready to say this is the proposed implementation, but we did think it was important before we go into an organizational meeting to brief this board on kind of the status of that. And so Shannon Hutchins is going to review kind of where we are, and then we can talk a little bit about sort of where we're going with this.
Can you maybe use what are on here?
If you got to use a hard copy on the Elmo, you can do that. We always have that as a fallback. So is it part of that one? It's not part of that. But it actually reminded me, there's sort of two parts of this discussion. One of them, and both have a place on the agenda, but we probably will pull one of them off, at least for action on the first. But the other one was the decision the board made around the ARPA funding. And so Shannon will review that as well.
Apologize. Ashley's going to pull that up on her computer.
All right.
Well, while Ashley is pulling it up on the computer, I will officially turn the meeting over to our Vice Chairman, Don Martin. Perfect timing,
You
Don.
know, Dudley's doing a great job at it.
Not really.
You know, my mother used to say it's so quiet you could hear a pin drop. If this was television, we could take a break for a word from our sponsors.
While she's pulling that up, good afternoon, Commissioners.
Are you having a good day?
I'm having a good day. I hope you all are.
So far, yeah.
So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Lockton study and give you all an update on where we're at with all of that. Are you able to find it, Ashley?
What are you going to do for Thanksgiving?
A lot of cooking.
Oh, do you prepare the whole
I
thing?
have a lot of family coming to the house, yeah.
Oh, boy.
Okay, very good. It's up there. Thank you so much. So just a quick update of where we are with Lockton. In January of this year, the board approved a number of mid-year adjustments in response to continued staffing challenges throughout the county. So part of that was, the board authorized staff to contract with a compensation company, Lockton, to conduct a comprehensive salary study. Lockton began their survey and their study project in February, and they completed the data, sent us some completed data on November 10th. Next slide. Can I do this, or can you do it? Okay. Okay. So an overview of the project, Lockton used a combination of data to determine how county salaries compared to the market. Part of that was a custom survey, which consisted of governmental agencies throughout the state of North Carolina, including employee salary data, time and grade, tenure, bonuses, and employee benefits. They also used a published survey data, which consisted of published data nationwide using leaders in the industry, and that included Mercer, Willis, Towers, Watson, Comp Data, and several other industry-specific data sources. They also conducted a separate review of pay ranges for the 5 governmental agencies most closely aligning with the employee population, county population, and or proximity to Forsyth County. So the next slide details the participants and data sources used for that project. So here you'll see a list of participants and data sources that was used in the study. I won't read each of these out, but as you can see, Lockton used a comprehensive list to obtain the data. Through the analysis, Lockton looked at labor differentials and cost of living differentials and determined that Forsyth County was marginally competitive with our salaries. So Lockton surveyed or studied 154 jobs, which represents 43% of county job classifications. It's customary to study about a third of jobs in a compensation study. So using the data from all sources, Lockton created market values or grade ranges for jobs to be slotted into a pay plan structure. Based on the data, Lockton also recommended a general pay plan structure and a separate public safety structure. Lockton deals in employees' actual salaries and midpoint data. This is how they use the custom and the published data, and their method is to bring employees into the range without regard to grade ranges. So while that piece works for retention, it does nothing for recruitment. Jobs that were not studied were slotted using the benchmarks as an anchor. Human Resources has worked with Lockton to slot non-benchmark jobs based on the current pay plan with consideration to similarities of job, organizational structures within the departments, and a thorough review of minimum requirements and job complexity. So the full cost of implementation is estimated at $17 million. This includes vacancies and fringe. The budgeted amount is $5 million. Staff is working on options to provide the board in the coming weeks on how to implement.
And I'll just add to that. So, we're in a place where it's predictable. Obviously, you do one of these studies, and always the cost is higher than available funding. Obviously, the $5 million number we used last year during the budget process. We identified a recurring source of revenue, which was important, and that's what we were able to balance last year's budget with, and then start this work. Ideally, it would be late September or middle October now, and we would be able to sort of sort through what one-time money might go to help us move towards the 17 million, and then, or are we just at a place where $5 million is what we have to work with? We're talking about a mid-year implementation anyway, so clearly you could go ahead and implement a $10 million step towards this and still be okay in the current year budget. It would put $5 million of additional pressure on the budget going into next year. And so, I think where we are at this point is we need to bring back to you some options for that, really to try to deal with what part of a phased implementation we can move towards with this. I mean, the good news is that what we've got is we were deemed marginally competitive. We're not losing out on every new employee right now. I mean, every Monday we do a new employee orientation. We welcome folks into the organization. We also lose people. There is some of that. We're losing folks and adding folks kind of all at the same time. We clearly have some work to do to get to where we need to be. We've got a goal to get to it at this point, and we've just got to figure out what strategy to try to get there, hopefully as quickly as possible. Because to the extent you're not getting there, you're falling back some. But the other part of it that will be helpful from the board's perspective is, we've got not every position moves in this. We have a number of positions really that were deemed that are competitive and we don't need to move at all. We can identify positions where we have high turnover, and you can take an approach towards sort of a focus and an emphasis on those. You can take an approach on where we've got real recruitment issues, where we're just not seeing people come in the door. Obviously, the detention center is one of those. We've got other positions where it's just really difficult to recruit. So, obviously 17 million takes care of it across the board. We might have to parse that out in a strategic way in the early parts of the implementation with it. But, and at this point, it's probably going to be new business in December as we work through some and present some solutions to you. But we did want to close out, at least we've gotten the work back. We sort of know what the hill is we've got to climb. We just got to put some strategies together that the board, that are financially responsible and don't.
I'll take any questions.
I've got one particular, just something to be helpful to me. In the appendix, you all sent us a copy of sort of what they provided. And in the appendix, it has, I don't know if it's all 156 of those jobs, but it has a lot of the jobs listed, and it shows the comparison, either county or city government that participated of our similar like group. So that's 5, and for folks that are listening, it's Buncombe County, it's Durham County, it's Guilford County, it's the city of Winston-Salem, and it's New Hanover County, I think, are the 5. And most of those have all those jobs represented. It would be what was missing in their appendix chart was what the numbers were for Forsyth County in each of those jobs. So they were listed in order in those comparison counties or cities. They were listed in order of the highest to lowest, but it'd be nice if we had where Forsyth is in that listing, where we can see, because I'm sure in some of those positions we're up in the top area, and some I'm sure we're in the bottom. And I suspect there are differences also between beginning, mid-range, and end, and at the high end. And that gives another way of kind of comparing the way we have structured our schedule. And that would that'd be helpful to me. I don't know if it'd be helpful to others. And they did provide, they asked a lot of questions of all the counties, which they surveyed about. I think there were 20 participating counties and or cities. And they provided sort of this benefit package, if you will, sort of the total rewards. And it would be helpful if they have them in a chart that just shows all of them. They're not separated out by individual county. But if we could pull out, which I assume is available for those comparison county cities, the 4 counties in the city of Winston-Salem, and then look at ours compared in our benefit summary, because I would think we're probably above the average of those 5 in benefits. Maybe wrong, but it would be interesting to see what that looked like too, because that's kind of another piece of the puzzle. Because the benefit costs are a huge part of what we do too, and we've added a number of things in the recent past. So if we had that, it would be helpful as you all continue working on sort of the final sort of a plan, and from you all have already spent umpteen hours after you got the report. I mean, just trying to get something, together, because as I think everybody knows, the report has been delayed, partly because of staff shortages on Lockton's part. I mean, the very issue we're trying to deal with, they've been dealing with, and it has been very late, and that's why we're dealing with it in the middle of the year. So if I could have that would help me sort of put that in sort of some kind of, it would jump out things that are really, where we're really not competitive, if you will, and the things where we're better than marginally. Their overall word was marginally competitive. I suspect in some of those jobs we're clearly better than marginal. We're competitive, and in some others we're not marginal. We're below that. So I've said that about 3 different ways. I apologize for doing that, but that'd be helpful.
Absolutely, yeah. We'll be able to get that information from Lawton, and I'll make sure you get that.
One question, Mr. Vice Chair. Could you give us an estimate of what it would cost to just gradually implement this plan ASAP?
So if we were to implement in one step up, then we would be looking at around $10 million annualized. That's including the vacancies, it's including fringe and fringe for the vacancies.
Okay.
And that's, considering there's 448 vacancies also. Did that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. Yes, so about $5 million short, give or take $1 or $2.
Yes, sir.
Well, and 5 million short, but it'll be less than that because you'll adjust out for some of that salary slippage vacancy. Because as you mentioned, that cost, that 17 million cost assumes that every position's filled. It includes fringe benefits, and so it's salary and fringes for every one of them. So we offset that with a number in the budget for salary savings that's just an offset to it, and that number would go up.
Well, after a casual reading of the study, my inclination is to support the study and pay our employees because they are really the face of the county. So I would vote to implement this, gradually for the $10 million, even though we're not voting today. Just my gut feeling since I have few options ahead of me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon, and appreciate all your work. She's been doing this in addition to, we are in the thick of the HCM, which is the personnel side of the ERP system that we're doing, and so it's just a lot going on. Last item was an agenda item that we pulled out for discussion was Piedmont flight training, and I was just going to see if Gordon would want to update the board on those conversations.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as you know, a couple of weeks ago, I had conversations with you board members about this agreement and what you wanted it to look like. 2 weeks ago, I sent out a second draft to Piedmont Flight School. They just responded, and I spoke with them last week. They just responded last night at 7:41 p.m. They sent back a response to that, which did not include full agreement with all of the terms that you wanted, and so we don't yet have an agreement between the parties. So I would recommend that this be pulled off from the December 1st agenda.
Gordon.
Any other questions or discussion about that? Well, good. I think we're now ready to review the briefing items for December the 1st, the items actually on the agenda for December the 1st.
That's right, and so as we go through the ones we just talked about, we can kind of update and what have you. So first three items are public hearings on zoning petitions, and so I'll turn it over to Chris Murphy. It's going to be F-1618, F-1620, and F-1621.
Correct. Good afternoon, Chairman, Vice Chairman, members of the board. Hope everyone's doing well. We did brief these about 10 days ago for the first briefing. This is the second briefing. The first request is a request of Deepak Patel and Kripalu Abodes LLC to rezone about 1.21 acres of property on the corner of Kernersville Road and Hastings Hill Road from RS9 to NBS. This is where the subject property is shown on the Legacy Growth Management Area Plan, GMA 3, west of an activity center in the town of Kernersville. This is the subject property highlighted in yellow, again on the corner of Hastings Hill and Kernersville Road. Same outline of the property on the countywide aerial imagery. This is some sites, some photos that were taken on site, again around Hastings Hill and Kernersville. This is looking east on Kernersville Road, subject property to the left. This is looking, I believe, back to the west on Kernersville Road, subject property is on the right. This is looking south on Hastings Hill. The subject property is in the background. And this is subject property looking north on Hastings Hill Road. The subject property is where the tree is there. This is the area plan map. It recognizes the area as being single-family residential and doesn't recommend any changes to that land use recommendation.
Can I ask you a question on that map before you leave it?
Yes.
The little red, sort of almost a rectangle that is diagonal to the property in question, what is that, and what is it?
It's a legally non-conforming site. I can't remember if that's the location. There was a lighting place out there, and there is a nursery out there. I'm not sure which site that is, but it is legally non-conforming. It's currently zoned residential. That little, the asterisk and the letter indicates in the actual plan that it's a legally non-conforming use, and the plan doesn't recommend changing the zoning, but it recognizes it as commercial.
Because I know that ultimately at the end of this, the staff, planning staff kind of recommended not to approve because of inconsistency with the area plan and the potential spot zoning challenge. I take it that that was not challenged as a spot zoning
It's
issue.
not challenged, again, because it's not zoned appropriately. It's zoned residential.
Oh, so it's,
Correct. It's that,
the zoning was not changed, it's just a non-conforming use allowed.
correct. It
Chris, was that
legally non-conforming use.
was that grandfathered in?
Yes.
So it was existing before zoning was?
Okay.
Yeah, that's recognizing that it's commercial in nature, but it's zoned residential, if that makes sense. And we have lots of we don't have a lot of them in the county. Most of them are in the city, but we do have some legally non-conforming uses in the county, and that's what this plan recognizes, and that's what that little letter indicates, is that is a legally non-conforming use, i.e. grandfathered. It's zoned residential, but it's been commercial use for 60 years at this point.
Okay, thanks.
And I will, one of the questions that was asked when I briefed this 10 days ago, as the crow flies, the nearest grocery store within the red area in Kernersville is about 0.85 miles. As you drive it, it's over a mile to the nearest grocery. So while I'm on here, I'll just go ahead and throw that out there. This is the site plan associated with the case. It is the use is food or drugstore. The building is pulled up to the corner of Hastings Hill and Kernersville Road, and parking is all located to the side of the rear. The only driveway location is off Hastings Hill Road at the northern, northwesternmost portion of the site. This is what the elevation of the proposed building would look like. Again, from Hastings Hill, from Kernersville Road, from the parking lot, and from that northern portion of the site if you're driving into it. In summary, the proposed development could further promote commercial strip development along a largely residential section of the Kernersville Road corridor. The proposed development would likely attract customers from outside the neighborhood and primarily cater to motorists, significantly increasing traffic in the area. The proposed rezoning could likely be considered an illegal spot zone if challenged in court. The requested use food or drugstore was viewed by the planning board as being needed in the area, and therefore it was, even though it was viewed as being inconsistent with the adopted plan, they did vote to recommend approval of the request to the commissioners. At the October 13th planning board meeting, there were two speakers that spoke in opposition, primarily concerned with traffic impacts. So again, hearing all the evidence at the hearing, the planning board did recognize it was inconsistent with the plan, but felt like that since there wasn't any food-related uses within a mile, that they felt like that this was fine and could be recommended approval to the county commissioners. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
I've got one other one. It seems like I read in the summary of I think it was actually I can't remember where it was in the exactly, but it talked about there were already like 20,000 cars count on Kernersville Road, that area. And that, I mean, does that number sound like, I'd have to go back and look at it to find that, to see where that number showed up.
No, I believe that's high. I believe that might be the capacity of the road with future road widening projects. I want to say that the actual traffic on the road.
Yeah, I actually think the comment may have come from one of the comments. You know, one of the speakers may have said that, like maybe some of the people speaking in favor of why they kind of wanted to do it. I apologize for not.
Well, that's fine. The traffic count along Kernersville Road at that intersection is 11,000 trips per day currently.
Okay. All right.
And the road in that area has a capacity of 15,300 before it reaches a level of service D, which is considered an unacceptable level of service. The traffic on Hastings Hill Road is at 5,800 trips per day, and again, it has a capacity of 15,000. So Basically, the introduction of this in and of itself won't have a negative impact on traffic. I can't speak to what may have been said by someone in the public hearing, but again, the actual numbers that we have in the report are from Winston-Salem DOT/NCDOT and their review of the project.
Yes, in fact, this is a person that spoke for it, Ashley Ship, and she had bullet points, and she said the average daily traffic in this part of Kernersville Road is 20,000 cars. I know somewhere. It was somebody's comment. But obviously, if there's 5,000 on Hastings Hill and there's 11,000, you're looking at 16,000 right now, sounds like. I'm on Kernersville Road, 11, Hastings Hill, 5, coming up in that area. So I guess there was a comment that it probably doesn't bring in extra traffic. It sounds like it's already got a lot of traffic that's already coming by there in terms of trips per day. So this is a question for Gordon, and I'll be done. And that I assume it would be a property owner would have to be unhappy if this were approved, and then they could file a spot zoning challenge, which I assume would be against us directly.
That's correct. And as Mr. Murphy indicated, the planning board did find that this is inconsistent with legacy, but they approved it nevertheless. So yes, someone could challenge us on the basis of the spot zoning argument.
Got it.
Chris, before when you went over this, it seemed like to me you said that access would be off of Hastings Hill Road.
Correct.
Well, is it anything about if you're what I'd call traveling north on, but it's so close to the intersection, I don't know whether they could do it or not, a turn lane. Because if you're traveling north, or sort of northwest, then they're going to have to cross the road to get to it. So, it is a lot of traffic there. So, and a lot of places have turn lanes, but that's so close back to the intersection. I don't know whether there's enough room there or not.
There isn't anything indicated by NCDOT in their review of the project. Now, again, if at the time they apply for their driveway permit, NCDOT can always require additional requirements if it warrants them having to install a turn lane. But there's not one shown on the plan, and there's not one mentioned specifically in here. But it does say they have to apply for the driveway permit.
Well, does the staff believe that? Well, you said so, that traffic would come from other areas to this location. If somebody's back close to Kernersville Road where all the shopping is up there, they wouldn't drive down here unless it's passing. And then over at, you're not too far away over at Beeson's Crossroads, there's I don't know what all is there. It's quite a bit. If somebody's over there and they want to go to the grocery store or whatever shopping they might want to do, I can't see them driving over here. It looks like to me that in places like this, they would just pick up what traffic is going through anyway, not coming from somewhere else.
I mean, again, I think whenever staff analyzed this and presented it to the planning board, our thought was a neighborhood business zoning district is supposed to be catered to the neighborhood. And this type of use, more than likely, given the size of it, couldn't just be supported by the neighborhood. And that was why the part of our recommendation was looking at the fact that this is going to attract folks from outside the neighborhood to the use. But again, a lot of that is going to be what they call internal capture of folks already driving down Kernersville Road, already driving up and down Hastings Hill Road. So I don't think it's going to attract more folks necessarily from outside the neighborhood. It's just not going to be necessarily neighborhood serving, which is what the district they're requesting is.
Chris, this building looks a whole lot like the one that was built on Williams Road across from the vineyard. And it was, at the time, I questioned it, and the applicant had said it was for residential use. A few years later, they apparently had sold it, and somebody was going to open up a food market or a produce market there. And then apparently that didn't go through, but the building's still standing there, and I think it was one of those Morton things or whatever it might be. These people at least are straight up telling you they're going to be using it for sales of produce or whatever else it is. And it would have been an attractive business, I think, on Williams Road had they been straight up about it, but things happened, whatever it was. But these are great opportunities for folks who are in the farming business to sell some goods on the road, and I hope that one on Williams turns out to be okay. I don't know if you keep up with that stuff or not. You got so damn many things to do, but
The last time I had anything to do with it was the last time you asked me about it, probably. So.
yeah, it could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for them. I hope it happens.
I had one question, Mr. Vice Chair. Christian, you say there was just traffic impact. Is there anything besides just the level of traffic going down those streets that you're concerned with on the impact of the neighborhood, or is that the primary focus?
Well, again, I mean, you've got a couple different things. Basically, the oppositions, whenever the two folks that spoke in opposition, they spoke related to traffic.
Okay.
From a planning perspective, again, I'm here presenting you the recommendation of the planning board, which was for approval. Our staff had recommended denial. So it's one of those, situations where I'm presenting to you what the planning board's recommendation was. Our concern dealt with the spot zoning opinion that we had, and the fact that the neighborhood business zoning district, again, is meant to be neighborhood serving, and this is going to capture a lot of those trips of folks already passing by, perhaps bringing folks into the neighborhood that don't live there. From a pure planning standpoint, if you're going to approve this, it's as good as it can be. It's a neighborhood business zoning district with one proposed use, which doesn't leave them a lot of margin for error. If it's not successful, they'll be back to you to ask for something else. But I mean, again, a food or drug store, in the opinion of the planning board, was something that is needed in the area since there isn't anything within a mile of this location.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, I tried to fool a drawing on here with the scale. There's a part, looks like it's about 200 feet from the intersection on the property side to that driveway.
I think it says 250 in the staff report somewhere, but I could just be, misremembering that. Anything else on this one before I transition to the next two? All right.
Got it.
All right. This is F-1620. We're in the same general area. We're a little bit further to the northwest. This request is of P&P of Ashburn LLC to rezone 25.8 acres on the south side of Hastings Hill Road, west of Watermill Road, at the Beltway from RS9 to RM8S. Again, the subject property shown on the Legacy Growth Management Area Plan in GMA3 suburban neighborhoods. Again, just to the west of the Kernersville Activity Center on Hastings Hill Road at the Beltway. This is the subject property highlighted in yellow. Image outlined in yellow on the county's countywide aerial photos. This is the subject property shown on the Southeast Suburban Area Plan Update, again adopted in 2016, recommended primarily single-family residential 0 to 8 units per acre. This is looking east on Hastings Hill Road. Subject property is on the right. See the zoning sign there. And this is looking west on Hastings Hill Road. Subject property is on the left. That's where Hastings Hill Road crosses the Beltway. And this is looking south on the northern Beltway. The subject property is on the left. This is looking at the subject property from Hastings Hill Road. This is also on the subject property. I believe this is looking to the south, southeast. And this is looking at that neighboring subdivision, Watermill Road. The larger image is a site plan that you can see. I included the inset because, again, the orientation of the site plan on the bottom, or on the larger image, north is to your left, south is to your right, but I did provide that inset to see so that you could see how it actually sits on the land. It's 100 townhomes coming off Hastings Hill Road, large area of vegetation maintained in the southeast corner, one cul-de-sac, 100 townhomes. This is the rendering that was submitted with the application. In summary, the development has a proposed density of 3.88 units per acre, which is similar to the neighboring development to the east, single-family homes. The request will promote a mix of housing types, providing more housing choices for the population in the area. The proposed traffic impact would be less than the maximum allowed under the current single-family residential zoning. The townhomes will act as an appropriate transition from the Beltway to the single-family neighborhood to the east. This was heard by the planning board also at their October 13th, 2022 public hearing, where there were 2 speakers in opposition, primarily concerned with traffic and environmental issues. And when I say environmental issues, I think that is losing the wooded open space that's there currently, and then perhaps some stormwater issues. After hearing those concerns, the planning board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of this request, and the site plan does meet UDO requirements. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Only thing that got my attention a little on this one was that's only a one-way in and out for 100 townhomes. It struck me as of course, on the site plan, it's hard to figure out where you'd get a second entry in there, but that's, fortunately, I guess everyone doesn't go to work at the same time anymore. I mean, this is less likely to have staggered start times with at home and this, that, and the other. But
there is magic in that number. Over the course of time, things change. There used to be there was no limit to the number of residential units you could have with a single access. You had to provide stubs if stubs were available. Eventually, other development may pick up and interconnect. If there were stubs around your property, you had to connect into them. In this case, you've got the Beltway on the west. You've got a subdivision to the east that has no stubs. And you've got a stream to the south and nowhere to stub, even if you could cross that stream. Used to be, over the last 10 years, it was no more than 30 units without having a second means of access. The General Assembly and the Building Code Council and the fire changed that to no more than 100. So that's where that 100 units comes into play. Yep. So that was their limiting factor because they didn't have anywhere else to connect to, that they kept it at 100. But you're exactly right. There really isn't anywhere else to connect to in this particular project.
Other questions? Thank you.
I will go ahead and transition to the last item. And it is one, again, that we have seen before. It's F1621. And this is out on Renolda. 67 Motors, COC Investments LLC, for about 27 acres, north side of Renolda Road, across from Hoosier Drive and Seward Circle. This is a site plan amendment to amend the previously approved site plan for F1610 to move the storage services retail buildings and the access point further to the east. There is also a new office being proposed but the office is to serve the storage services retail use. This is a subject property shown on the Legacy Growth Management Area Plan in GMA 4, future growth area, there along Renolda. This is showing the subject property highlighted in yellow. It's already zoned GIS. Same image, countywide aerial photo. This is the subject property shown in the North Suburban Area Plan update adopted by the county in 2014, which recognized this as an industrial use. This is looking east on Renolda Road. The site is on the left. Looking west on Renolda Road, site is on the right. This is looking at the subject property from the other side of Renolda. This is looking across Renolda to Hoosier Drive. This was the old site plan that was approved. You notice everything is sort of concentrated on the northwestern portion of the site with those buildings. This is the proposed plan that's been shifted back towards the east. And this is done, it gets it further away from some other residential area properties to the northwest, but it also gets it back where you have better site distance, which was one of the issues whenever this went through the original rezoning, was some site distance concerns. In summary, the proposed site access point is in a better location than what was originally proposed. And there is no change in use or traffic from the original zoning case. The site is recommended for industrial by the North Suburban Area Plan. Again, this was heard by the Planning Board at their October 13th, 2022 public hearing. There were no speakers in opposition, and the Planning Board did vote unanimously to recommend approval of the request to the commissioners. And with that, I'll be glad to answer any questions.
All right. Thank you, Chris. All right, we have two economic development projects, agenda item 4 and agenda item 5. If I can get Colleen to just come up and just do a quick recap, but knowing that you'll name the industries maybe next week.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. These are the same projects that we talked about, I guess, a couple weeks ago. The first one would be the recruitment of a manufacturing company here with an expected capital investment of a little bit over $20 million and job creation of 79 full-time positions. The second is the expansion of a manufacturing company. That would be a capital investment of $5,820,000 and the creation of 180 new full-time positions. Once again, per our protocol, we will have full briefings on both of these projects next week and reveal the company's names. Happy to answer any questions.
One question, Carl, please.
Sure.
Did we get an invitation to attend a ribbon cutting or one of those two companies on the 28th?
It is not either of these companies.
Okay.
The company that we previously provided incentives for, Zeolabeg, it is that week. They have not determined exactly when and what time yet, but they're working on that, and we'll give you information as soon as we have it.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Kyle. Appreciate that. All right, agenda item, we've got two special resolutions. Item 6 is a resolution funding additional premium pay to county employees for on-site work performed during the COVID-19 public health emergency. I think Shannon's going to come back up and talk to that. When you see it the next time, it'll probably be listed under the ARPA funding category here, but I'll turn it over to Shannon.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. So, Ashley, do you have this one?
Yay. It worked.
Okay. So during ARPA Round 2, the board approved $2.3 million to be used for employee premium pay bonuses. And that is in addition to the rollover amount not used from Round 1, which totaled just over $2 million. So the first round of premium pay bonuses was issued under the Treasury's interim guidance. But in January of this year, the Treasury issued its final guidance, which provided flexibility and broadened the use of ARPA funds to restore and support government employment by hiring above the pre-pandemic baseline, which, for example, would be sign-on bonuses, And it also allows for the use of funds to provide retention incentives. Other provisions of the final guidance remain consistent with the interim guidance in that premium pay should be used to compensate eligible employees needed to maintain the continuity of operations. The Treasury further continued its definition of eligible work as work performed while not teleworking from a residence and work that involves regular in-person interactions or handling of items handled by others. So staff proposes to use the approved ARPA premium pay funds to provide eligible full-time and part-time employees a bonus paid out in 2 installments. This plan proposes a $1,000 bonus paid in December and a $700 bonus paid in June to all full-time employees who meet the eligibility requirements. Part-time employees with benefits who meet the eligibility requirements would receive a $200 bonus paid in December and $200 bonus paid in June. The total estimated cost, including fringe, is $4.2 million and is within the amount allotted by the board. To be eligible for the bonuses, employees must work an average of at least 50% on-site and have regular in-person interactions or regular physical handling of items handled by others. Employees qualify, the next slide. Employees qualify for the December bonus payment if they are full-time or part-time with benefits, they were hired on or before November 26, 2022, their work requires 50% or more on-site, and they are an active employee on payroll as of December 10th. The bonus payment would be made as an adjustment to pay in the employee's paycheck on December 16th. To be eligible for the June payment, employees must meet the criteria mentioned before, except they must be hired on or before May 27th, 2023, and be active on payroll as of June 10th, 2023. The bonus would also be made as an adjustment to pay in the employee's regular paycheck on June 16th. 2023. So as with the first round of ARPA premium pay bonuses, there will be an authorization process. HR will provide department managers with a spreadsheet to indicate if the employee meets the criteria. And I will be happy to answer any questions.
I had one question, Mr. Vice Chair. Roughly, how many people, Shannon, are we talking about, number of employees that might benefit from this? Ballpark, don't have to be exact.
Yeah, so an estimate, over 1,800 employees.
1,800? Mm-hmm. You'd all get a Christmas gift, a little bonus on the 16th of December?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Vice Chairman, if I may, so Shannon, thank you so very much for the report as well. And just for me, I'm just going to piggyback on Commissioner Elamine's question. That is across the board for everyone, correct?
As long as they meet the eligibility requirements. So it's full-time employees and part-time with benefit employees. I'm trying to fit it into the Treasury's final guidance. It would only affect those 2 categories of employees.
Right, but we're not working with tier services at this time, correct? Thank you, that's all I needed to confirm.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thanks, Shannon. All right, agenda item 7 will be pulled because of the discussion we had earlier regarding the Forsyth County pay plan. We're still working on that. Item 8 are approval of the minutes for the meeting of November 10th, which, have they gone out, Madam Clerk? Okay.
The minutes will go out before the Thanksgiving break.
Okay, great. So those will be coming to you. Agenda item 9 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget ordinance that appropriates fund balance to the Forsyth County Board of Elections for contract printing. My suspicion is Kyle or Kimberly, the great leader Kyle Wolf is going to come up and brief this one.
Yeah, sorry about that. So this is appropriating some funds from fund balance to be able to pay for some contract printing costs for the Board of Elections. It was a contract that expired June 30th, 2022, or the funds were not budgeted in the FY23 budget for elections, and so we need to appropriate this money. The other option would be to transfer it from contingency, so we could do it either way. It was 30, I can't remember, it was a little over $30,000.
Right. All right. No questions for that. Item 10 is also yours. It's an amendment to the fiscal year 2022-23 budget ordinance. It appropriates unreserved fund balance to establish the 2022 PAYGO capital projects ordinance. I'll lead off with it. Basically, we took the item that was in the budget ordinance as far as projects that were identified when you passed the budget back in last June, and we just rolled those over, and then you updated the numbers, and they have the year-end balances.
I'm sorry?
And you've got have we filled in the year-end balances on that one yet? My computer died.
We do not have the year-end balances, and so what this item would do is it would appropriate anticipated funds that could be available as a result of the FY22 year-end audit. It includes, so as others say in the 23 budget ordinance, in section 17 listed several projects that could be funded if there were sufficient PAYGO dollars available. And so those projects totaled basically $20,016,620. And again, staff believes this amount will be available once the year-end audit is finalized. And then if there's not sufficient PAYGO funding available for that list of projects, then management will identify projects that can be placed on hold and report that back to the Board of Commissioners.
And we should be in a position, I presume, I'm looking at Terry, our CFO, by the time we get to next Thursday, we'll be pretty close. Okay. So we might have to modify it a little bit if you want to after we close out the final audit, but this would close out sort of as year-end business, kind of the old business related to this item.
Can I ask you just a couple questions about, actually about three items? There are two on there on the Economic Development Reserve and Economic Development Projects. And what is kind of it's certainly not, what we do with incentives, with tax incentives and those things. So is this thinking about the possibility of doing some utility kind of work and working with the Utilities Commission? What's kind of envisioned in that $6.5 million reserve?
Yeah, and I think my suggestion will be just to roll them into a reserve, the whole $6.5 million into the reserve. It was thoughts about some of the unfunded parts of parks projects maybe that were out there. It was the sewer up in Wahlberg that was the subject kind of a legislative kind of effort. And it was one other one that's going to, it was whether or not there's a Tanglewood Business Park project that kind of was out there floating around. So, but I think for the purposes of the action on the first, we'll just include them all in a reserve. The board's going to have to take action on every one of those to pull it out of the PAYGO or to fund the projects anyway. And so, but this would get it budgeted.
Yeah, and the third one is the Reynolds Stadium item. You knew that might be on the list of three. And I would just say that just with my personal history with this project, goes back 10 years, and basically some agreements were reached at that time of sort of what the school district would do regarding that stadium and what Home Field Advantage would do. And I do want to thank them for they immediately raised money and fixed the practice fields for the football team at the base of Reynolds High School off of Renolda, across from the children's home, and that was a big improvement and was helpful. But the stadium itself was going to be a pretty substantial lift in fundraising, but the district provided, and now through their bond issue in 2016, has been able to fulfill all their requirements, which included replacing the Wiley Gym, which was a big one, adding in the Wiley Gym in the build-back locker room space, also to provide to grade the surface for the field, create an access road in the back, and basically all that's been done. The school board has already, from the graded field, has already spent about $800,000 on that field, and has already spent an additional $1.7 million to basically provide sort of rebar support back into the hillside there to provide a lot of additional reinforcement in that area. So there's already been a lot of public money through the school board, and that's their business. And it's my opinion that the rest of the whole, whatever they do, is the school board's business and not our business. And that we have no business providing any additional funds for that project. School board has other sources of revenue that they have already tapped in different ways, and they're likely to have more. I think they're planning on a bond issue in 2024, just around the corner. If there's a dollar still missing, that's an opportunity to close the gap and let the public vote. So, depending on how we vote on this, that piece I cannot support.
Mr. Manager, just for your information, you probably already know it, that the electric vehicles are gaining popularity, and they get more of the electric fuel stations, and so that ought to make you happy. We'll just see how it works out. So, well, they might work out good enough that you might get one sometime.
I don't know. We'll see. I'll be driving my old wore-out vehicles for a long time, I believe. Still putting gas in them. All right, so we'll prepare sort of two options so that the board has that ready for them on item number 11. Agenda item 10. Agenda item 11 is an amendment to the fiscal year 2023 budget ordinance that appropriates fund balance to cover prior year encumbrances. Kyle.
Sure. And so this is an item that we bring forward on a pretty much annual basis. And so what we need to do with this item is appropriate some fund balance to fund outstanding encumbrances from FY22. Each year in the adopted budget, we include funds to cover prior year encumbrances. This year we had budgeted $1.8 million, and for FY22, at the close of FY22 on June 30th, 2022, the total amount of encumbrances was actually $3,752,494.50, and so this is appropriating an additional $1,952,494.50 to cover those outstanding obligations. And there's a list of outstanding obligations included in the agenda item.
Any questions on that?
No questions.
All right. Agenda item 12 is also Kyle's. It's an amendment to the fiscal year 23 budget to establish the new communications department.
Sure. And so, as you remember, during the FY23 budget process, an alternate service level request to fund a communications effort for the county was approved as part of the adopted budget. And the request was based on 3 positions and various equipment needs, with an understanding that resources from other departments could possibly be shifted as well. And 4 positions within MIS have been identified to shift over to our new communications department. And we've hired Ed McNeil as our public information officer. And so this item is really just necessary to create this new office in the budget ordinance and transfer those funds and those positions from MIS to this new office. Any other questions?
Very good. All right. And then the last budget item is an amendment to the 23 budget to appropriate funds from North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services.
Yeah, that was the item that we walked in last week. And so you can pull that item. Because that was the item that was approved last week.
So that's done?
They approved it at the meeting.
All right. All right, very good.
One question, Kyle, before you leave the podium, please. Could you remind me the amount of the PAYGO funds we identified in the last budget? Was it close to 20 million, or was it a little less than that? In the current year's budget ordinance? Right. It was, they basically totaled $20,016,620. It was actually a little bit less than that because there was an ambulance that was not included in the list. Right. But
the board had indicated there was support for funding that ambulance when there was an emergency services alternate service level that was funded basically half of the year with the idea that from PAYGO, an ambulance would be purchased as well.
Thank you, Kyle.
All right, very good. Thank you, Kyle. All right, agenda item 14 is a resolution approving Forsyth County's request for single-family urgent repair funding from the American Rescue Plan Acts. And so, Aisha, are you or Kyle? Come on up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. On September 22nd, 2022, the board approved a preliminary ARPA Round 2 funding plan, which included funding the Forsyth County Community Economic Development Department Single Family Home Urgent Repair Program for $120,000. This program will provide funds to assist 10 low-income households with urgent repairs, addressing housing conditions which pose imminent threats to their lives and/or safety. This program serves households residing within Forsyth County, including the city limits of Winston-Salem, whose annual household income is below 50% AMI. Each household served will have an individual project funding limit of $12,000. If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them now. Thank you.
Congratulations. Thank you very much.
All right, we have a number of contracts for consideration. Item 15 and 16 are both exciting new projects, and I think James Anderson's going to come up and review these. Item 15 is a resolution selecting and authorizing the execution of an agreement with Shelco LLC to act as a design builder and provide design and pre-construction services for the Forsyth County Agricultural Park complex project. So turn it over to James. We've come a long way since Tanglewood a couple of years ago.
All right. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. This item is the staff recommendation to select Shelco as the design builder for the Agricultural Park Complex project, formerly known as the Multi-Use Event Center. Just a quick recap of the project. This was approved by a bond referendum in 2016 with 71% voting for it and 29% voting against. And so as you know, this was originally considered for Tanglewood Park. After a series of public input sessions at both Tanglewood and in Tobaccoville regarding the Rolling Hills property, the recommendation is to move forward at the county's Rolling Hills property off Doral Drive. And you can see on the left-hand side here kind of summarized the number of community input sessions that we had regarding this project.
You got a lot of information, didn't you?
Yes, sir. And out of that came some passive park activities, which included trails, picnic shelters, playground, and some demonstration gardens. And then there was some requests around an outdoor or indoor equestrian type ring event center that would include lawn and garden shows, agricultural education, dog shows, and livestock shows. And so this is a conceptual plan that was put together by City County Planning. And so really what we're looking at in this first phase will be the development on the north side of the railroad tracks there. And you can kind of see the different colored blocks there in orange are the potential buildings that will be built out as part of this project. Really the first phase is ultimately going to be the site work and developing and getting into that site. And so Shelco was selected by an RFQ process. We received 4 responses to the RFQ with Shelco, Davy Construction, Frank L. Balloon Construction, and IL Long Construction responding. The selection committee comprised of general services staff, parks and recreation staff, and a representative from the manager's office. Unanimously scored Shelco as the most qualified firm for the project. And then subsequently staff negotiated a design phase fee of $750,000, which represents approximately 9% of the $8 million construction budget, or 7.5% roughly of the total project budget of $9.95 million. And be glad to answer any questions you might have.
I have just one question, and it really gets at, as we've done several of these, kind of back in the old general architect days, things were a little more standardized in what those fees became. And I realize the individual, I mean, there are factors in every project that are going to change the price. And I'm kind of just, I mean, are we kind of sort of a smaller, in the old architect fee world, smaller projects would have a higher fee on percent of the project simply because there's a lot of basic startup and those kind of things. But projects of certain magnitude sort of stabilize, you pretty much could count on something in a fairly small range. I mean, I suspect you keep track of this, of all of the kind of design build, these kind of projects that we are hiring, where the design work is taking place within the builder, and they're giving us a guaranteed maximum price. And I'd be real curious, kind of cost of projects and range of fees, because I just don't have a good feeling for I don't mean that I have a bad feeling about this project. I just don't have a feeling for kind of what kind of you should expect as a good number. Is it fair to assume that the Shellco proposal was, in terms of percentages, the cheapest of the three?
So for the design build selection, we're not allowed to solicit on price. So it's a qualifications-based selection.
I do understand that part, but I am curious what their fees, whether it was the lowest. Can you say that?
So we didn't solicit fees from the other firms. You can't ask for fee as part of the selection process. The only thing that we could ask for is rate schedules.
Interesting, because we've done design bid work with both IL Long and Bloom.
Correct.
And I'm just kind of curious in this project, what jumped out for Shellco? And I'm not advocating for either. I'm just kind of curious about that.
Their expertise of the team that they'd put together was what the selection committee had everybody across the board identified as the most qualified for the project. I'd have to go back individually to the committee members to get you specifics on what folks felt set them apart from the other firms.
I guess I'd probably argue they're all qualified. The question becomes one of, I'm trying to decide what is the key thing that made that match. It's kind of unimportant. I'm fine. Shellco, they're all three good people, good folks. I've worked with all three before in the past. They're all three good. So I won't say any more except, you understand where I'm getting at?
Yes, sir. Yep. And so we do track the kind of fee percentages that we see. And so this one, we went back to Shellco and hammered pretty hard on them to get their fee down. Originally, we came in at around 10 to 11% to start, and we were able to get them down to that 9% of the construction budget. So we were able to get some out of it to get it where Damon and I felt like was a fair fee to them and also a fair fee to the county. And typically, we've been paying around 10 to the highest, I think, was 12% for a design build project so far.
I kind of enjoyed that phrase you used. I can see it in a headline. We hammered hard to get their fee down. I kind of picture someone with a hammer, and here's the word fee up there.
So James, does that 9.9 million, almost $10 million, does that include the $5 million that was in the PAYGO action that the board will vote on December 1st?
Kyle?
Does that 9.9 include the 5 million?
I think it does, because wasn't it 5 million in the bond issue and then this 5 million, and that's obviously 9.9 is.
Well, and then you had about 2.5 in for the cooperative extension move.
That's true.
So, yeah, so
That's true, additional.
That was, I think it was around 10 million was the number that I had.
10 million.
With the 5 million from the PAYGO.
Right, because I think there was, from the 2016 bond, we had, what, 4.5 or 5?
I thought it was 5.
I think it was 5.
I
thought it was 5 from the 2016 bond, but.
Yeah, let's validate that before next Thursday, please, because there may be another $2.5 million. You may be missing the cooperative extension money.
I know the cooperative extension money is not in that number. No, because that was 2.4 million, I think, is what we had for the cooperative extension move, and so that's not in that number.
All right.
I know that 2.4 is not. Well, I know that we have 2.4. Then there's the 5 million from the PAYGO discussion that we just talked about, And then there was the $5 million from the 2016 bond.
I think with cooperative extension, this is about a $12 million project, so we need to go back. I'm hoping that Shelco knows because they know they're building a building for cooperative extension, right?
Correct.
All right. And the building's probably way more complicated than a arena or a covered whatever, so let's just make sure we're good with that. Because it may be, if the denominator is 12 million, then that number's a whole lot better than.
I have a feeling there'll be a reevaluation on that point.
Well, yeah. Let's clarify that. All right, so the next project is actually at a different place, but equally as exciting. Item 16 is a resolution authorizing execution of amendment to the contract between Forsyth County and Barr Construction Company Incorporated as design builder for the Blues Lake project. And so we've got a guaranteed maximum price. And so as old business, I was hoping we could get to this place before December 1. So go ahead.
So just a quick update on the project before we jump into the number. Just to refresh everybody, so shaded in red, this is the property that was acquired to build the park on Blues Lake. This is an overview of the county showing our different park sites that we have. You can see this will be located up in the northeast corner of the county. Really don't have anything up in that area. Kind of the closest thing we have is either the Walkertown or the Kernersville Lake Park. So this is the master plan that was put together by the design team with Barr Construction in conjunction with input from Parks and Recreation and county staff. So eventually this will include a maintenance facility, picnic shelters, walking trails, and education, an event building, playgrounds, ADA accessible fishing docks, and comfort station. And just next few slides are just some views of the property from the lake. And so for the phase 1 construction project with this amendment to Barr, what we were getting for the GMP is site development, a maintenance facility located in the upper left-hand corner of the site, a comfort station and picnic shelter located here in the center of the site. And then down on kind of this southeast point, we're going to have a ADA accessible fishing dock and then also some walking trails. And so we've received a guaranteed maximum price proposal from Barr Construction for $6,655,000. That does include their 3% design builder fee. And then we also are holding a construction contingency of $280,000. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have.
So we can do a groundbreaking on this in January?
Okay. Just one question, please. It's been so long since we discussed this, I almost forgot that I brought this up. You know, as a history buff, I would love to see something named after Benjamin Forsyth in this location, even a walking trail, because there's very little known about him in the general population, but that's so close to his mark up in Germantown, it might be something to consider going forward.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Thanks, James. All right, agenda item 17 is a resolution awarding a 3-year service support contract to Axon Enterprise Incorporated for the Forsyth County Sheriff's Office Juvenile Intervention and Investigative Team. It is really a sole source exception to the bidding laws, and Randy Hunsucker will review.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and board members. Yes, this item authorizes a 3-year contract to provide cameras and tasers to the Sheriff's Office Juvenile Intervention and Investigative Team, known as JIT. The cost of the agreement is in an amount not to exceed $133,853, inclusive of taxes, over 3 years. The services provide for maintenance and repairs, equipment, hardware, component replacements, software upgrades, licensing, and the video data storage, which is the most expensive piece. The recommendation for contract award to Axon is based on provisions codified in this General Statutes 143-129E6, as well as the Forsyth County Federal Procurement Policy, Section 1.72. Under these provisions, the formal bid requirements do not apply. For example, when a needed product is available from only one source of supply, or in this case, standardization or compatibility is the overriding consideration. In this case, the equipment, data storage, and sharing must be compatible with the existing cameras and tasers. In addition, no other vendor currently provide three-way connected functionality between the tasers, the vehicle cameras, and the body-worn cameras, or a bundled cloud data solution for data storage. And finally, other law enforcement agencies in the county, City of Winston-Salem Police Department, and the Kernersville Police Department also use evidence.com, and data can be shared between the agencies, and the District Attorney's Office can use online prosecution books. The American Rescue Plan Act budget for the Sheriff's Office JIT team includes operating funds to cover the cost of the contract, and no additional funds are being requested today. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you, Randy. All right, items 18 and 19 are related. They're both resolutions authorizing the execution of amendments between Forsyth County and the temporary school nursing staffing agencies. And I'll turn it over to Joshua Swift, since he is walking up here.
Yes. Good afternoon, Commissioners. The first one before you, contract, is with IntelliChoice. They have been providing temporary school nursing services for the Department of Public Health, utilizing funds from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. And we are, the sole purposes of this is to ensure continuity of service, and this extends the contract with IntelliChoice staffing for 1 month through December 31st, 2012, and we will not exceed the original contract amount of $875,000.
And you may want to explain why it's related to the item.
Yes, so this
19.
directly ties into the next one. I'll move into that. We have, this is a contract between the Health Department and EDU Healthcare, LLC, to continue to, so we're moving from IntelliChoice to EDU Healthcare for our COVID-19 response. This is all part of our Agreement Addenda 362 to provide testing and COVID support in the school systems. And as this is pass-through funding that originated from the federal government, the Department of Public Health, we issued a formal RFP with the City County Purchasing Department to remain in compliance with federal procurement guidelines. We received 14 responses to the RFP. EDU Healthcare was the lowest vendor to provide RNs and the third lowest to provide LPNs, which we use both now with IntelliChoice. And this contract is not to exceed $1.3 million. Any questions?
For how many years, Josh?
This goes through May of 2023.
May of, okay, thank you.
Yes. We're continuing what we've been doing.
Right.
And actively searching for permanent nurses. So
yes, we are actively searching for permanent nurses as well.
All right. All right. Thanks, Joshua. Appreciate that. All right, winding down. Item 20 is the resolution related to a Piedmont flight training. As we heard from the attorney, we will pull that and get that on a future agenda so we can get that that nailed down. You've got appointments. You've got one appointment to the Forsyth County Historic Resources Commission. Was that a recommendation from? Kernersville. Okay, thank you. All right, so you'll have that. You've got refunds. Item 22 is the only one. We're going to pull item 23 because John Burgess told me to. He's working on something with that. And then the last item is the opioid settlement report. And I think that Denise is going to, there she is. Denise is going to, has been busy working on the plan. And she has a lot of good data about where we're going with all this opioid settlement money.
All right, here's the test. Can I remember what I was told to do here? Good afternoon. So thank you for the opportunity to share with you what we've been doing with opioid settlement planning. So as you know, there's a $26 billion agreement that's bringing needed resources into our community. The numbers in bullet 2 have changed already. They are a bit of a moving target. I'll tell you where they've changed and where they're the same. We do have $2.4 million that have been received by Forsyth County thus far. That number is correct. The amount of dollars that we're receiving through 2038 is changing. Currently, we're at $20.6 million that's anticipated, with more that may come in, and the city is also receiving dollars as well. There's a memorandum of agreement that we have with the state that tells us what we can and can't do with these dollars, and does give us some options. So one of our option points is, do we want to do option A strategies or option B strategies? So we're recommending that we do option B. That gives us more of an array of choices. So if we choose option B, we can do everything that's listed under option B and option A. So we get double the choices. Just a little bit of where we are. So this map is a little misleading because it is only specific to what EMS has responded to. It's for the period of January the 1st through October the 19th. The reason that I present this for you is so that you can see that there are dots scattered all over our county. Also, again, just so you can get some general idea of points in time, this is EMS data as well for 2020, 2021, and 2022. And you'll see that our total overdoses for the first part of the year, calendar year, is more for 2022 than it has been in previous years. Our fatal doses for the half a year is almost the total of what they were in 2021 and have already exceeded what they were in 2020. Doses of Narcan administered is about consistent, and the multiple doses administered is the only area that we're going down. Now, that too can be misleading without some additional information. So we do have Narcan and naloxone that's available in higher doses. So it may be that they're getting a higher dose of one administration versus having to do two to get in the same amount. So we've gone about gathering feedback from a lot of different groups. The memorandum of agreement that I referenced earlier does require that if we use strategy B, that we have to have an opioid settlement stakeholder committee. That committee has been convened and is actively working. It's 47 members. We've also conducted a community survey. We got 412 responses. Had a county and municipal leadership input session. We also received feedback from the public at that meeting. And then just others, just conversations, emails, phone calls. So a little bit about the community survey. I said 412 responses. 402 of those were from individuals who identified as working or living in Forsyth County. You can see that the majority of responders, from those 25 to 65 years old, they were Caucasian majority, did not identify as Hispanic, Spanish, or Latinx, work in the community, and want dollars equally spent between treatment and prevention. There were some top strategies that came out of that: support people connecting to people that can help them, providing support for people in treatment and recovery, and supporting evidence-based treatment of opioid use disorder. The stakeholder committee is overseen by Chantel. I facilitate the meetings, and our participants include, but are not listed, to a broad array of membership, some of that dictated by the MOA. That includes individuals with lived experience, healthcare providers, funders, etc. The committee came up with a shared vision. Again, that's an MOA requirement, and I'd like to read that to you. The Forsyth County Opioid Settlement Committee envisions communities where the needs of every person are met, holistically and timely, free of stigma and judgment, and rich with hope and acceptance. Communities where the supports to achieve goals and dreams, whatever those goals and dreams are achievable to all. A place where we are knowledgeable and equipped to make informed decisions, and where individuals, children, and families receive long-term healing supports. A community skilled and equipped with resources to recognize trauma and to navigate from trauma to healing. We recognize that we have a foundation that we can build on. We have a strong FROST team. We have Public Health's Community Health Assessment, Partners Health Management Needs Assessment and Gap Analysis, and the school's Youth Risk Behavior Survey, to name a few. We also recognize that there is funding that is occurring already. So some of the existing supports and services and resources included are listed for you on this presentation. And you can see that we are a community rich in resources. We also have some resources that will be coming soon, many of those you've heard about recently, like the Recovery to Work curriculum planning that's happening through a grant that we recently received. The committee also identified root causes, as did we receive this information through our survey and other means. The trend that emerged around root causes from every group that we spoke with is if we do not address root causes, we will end up in 2038 not further than where we are right now. On the community survey, of those 412 people that responded, 130 provided narrative feedback. Their input was incredible. So I've listed some examples of the feedback that came through the narrative. You'll see that there are trends, and we'll talk about trends at the end, that emerge between the different feedback groups. The group also talked about gaps and needs. So we're a community that's rich in resources. We do have some gaps, we do have some needs, and we do have some services and supports that are not accessible to all. The county and municipal leadership input session, again, here's some lists, and you'll see that there's some themes. You'll see the connections to services has appeared on every slide that's gone through, that the need for additional access to treatment is shown through on every slide. The stakeholder committee has also talked through some key indicators. The good news about the indicators that we've identified thus far that will help us to know whether we're actually making progress toward achieving our shared vision is that they are existing and we have some historical data, so we have good baselines. So the consistent themes, there were 5 of them, regardless of the group that we talked with that emerged. Prioritize our strategies focusing equally on prevention and treatment. That we must address root causes. That for the greater impact, that we should direct funds to fewer initiatives, not few funds to a lot of initiatives. That some of the strategies can be implemented within our existing infrastructure and without additional funding. And that some strategies are currently funded with non-settlement dollars. So the recommendation is that we move forward with 11 strategies that can be categorized under 4 general headings: treatment, support, prevention, and harm reduction. So for treatment, there are 2. The letters and the numbers correspond to the MOA and strategies that are allowed. The ones that start with an A are strategy A options, and the ones that start with a B are strategy B. So under treatment, it's expand evidence-based addiction treatment and to treat opioid use disorders. For support, it's recovery support services, recovery housing support, supporting people in treatment and recovery, and connecting people who need help to the help that they need. For prevention, it's early intervention and preventing misuse of opioids. For harm reduction, it's naloxone distribution and syringe service programs and preventing the overdose of deaths and other harms. So our next steps. We'd like your permission to issue a request for proposal to identify providers for approved strategies. What we'll do is come back with an addendum to this report incorporating specific funding recommendations. Annual funding recommendations will be submitted for your consideration. We'll continue to have touch points with our opioid settlement committee to assure that our strategies remain relevant to the community's need. Annual input sessions are required with the county and municipal leadership, and we'll routinely monitor measures to track the impact of our implemented strategies. Strategy recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners is required per the MOA every 4 years or more often if new strategy needs are recommended. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have one short one, and that is, in your opening comments, the money splits were roughly 19 million, and the city wants to say $3 million. Is the city having their own separate committee to do this exact same thing over for their $3 million?
My understanding is they have elected Strategy 8 only and intend to use most of their dollars around naloxone and harm reduction strategies.
Okay. So, but each committee is aware of what you're doing, I mean, what people
Correct.
are doing.
That's
So
the
so this is
intent of-
basically for the,
yes.
I'm trying to think in turn, you know, the statistic where the 900 or so Noxide, I pronounce that, I'm mispronouncing the Narcan, there's short version, the Narcan part. Is that mostly administered, I'm kind of curious how that splits between law enforcement and EMS personnel.
So I'm not sure what the law enforcement numbers are. We can certainly try to get those numbers for you. What I presented to you was just EMS.
Oh.
Right. So it also doesn't capture individuals who may have naloxone and administer, but then don't call 911 for assistance. We do get most of those numbers, or some of those numbers, through Twin City Harm Reduction Collective. They request information on a monthly basis from all the participants that they serve as to how many reversals there were.
Yeah, it just seems like the city's part would be dealing with Winston PD. If they give Narcan out and doing that, that would be important, and be a piece of that. And obviously, we use it in the jail, EMS uses it, Sheriff's Department has it available. Sure would be good to get a handle on that, on the total amount of those that are being given out. Surely that could be a data task of this task force to figure out how some of that stuff gets collected.
Absolutely.
I think just the fact that the EMS numbers haven't declined, where more people are aware of naloxone, Narcan, it suggests to me that the problem's not getting any better because you've got more people with more access to it, and you don't have those numbers in there. So,
yeah, that's a little discouraging.
It is discouraging.
Yeah, two
But
questions.
we should have fewer deaths, I guess, is it?
Finished up? Thank you very much. Just two quick questions, Denise. First, thank you for a very comprehensive report. Can we allocate some of the opioid monies we anticipate receiving to this program specifically? And do we have shelter directors of homeless shelters participating in some of this discussion?
We do have a shelter director who's participating, representing the shelters for us, yes. Okay. And the second part of your question?
Can we allocate some anticipated opiate funds to fund these programs?
Absolutely. That is exactly what this is for.
How much do you need?
Well, we have the $2.4 million that's coming in, and you all hear often about other sources of monies going into the opioid epidemic. There's a couple of times I've been before you in the last few months with dollars coming in through grants that are going to Twin City Harm Reduction to buy more naloxone and syringes and to support their programming. So there are other initiatives. What we'd like to do is put these out to RFP, see what happens with those $2.4 million. And like I said, the MOA requires that we meet every 4 years, that we convene this process every 4 years. But what we're hearing from folks is 4 years is not frequent enough. We need to be having these conversations on an ongoing basis. And there's a couple ways we can do that. We can do that through the settlement committee, but also through our Frost team.
Yeah, the other place this will blend in is we're doing this now, RFP will go out, and so you'll get those proposals, and this board will approve the funding for them. But also in the spring, with the maintenance of effort dollars through the behavioral health care piece, what Denise is saying is that you'll be able to look at, because those dollars are also eligible to use for this, but there might be programs that you're currently funding with these dollars that you want to use opioid dollars for, and then you'll get a different look of what happens on the behavioral health side. Chantel may want to add something to that, but those two processes are going to kind of interconnect.
Right. And the MOA requires that we can only do certain things, evidence-based strategies. So there may be things outside of what the MOA allows us to do that we want to use some of our behavioral health dollars for.
Yeah. And we expect, there's other settlements out there that Gordon might want to mention, that there are other agencies and organizations settling right now, so the dollars are going to go north a little bit off the 2 point.
Yeah, we're actually above 20 million so far with the bankruptcy of Mallinckrodt, and the ones you've heard about in the paper in the last couple of weeks are the major pharmacies, CVS, Walgreens, and Walmart. we're going to have to negotiate statewide a new MOA to cover those. And so we're already working on that. And that, if the formulas hold up, that could bring us another $12 million or so to Forsyth County. So there's more money. It's still, as Denise would tell you, a fraction of what we need, but it's certainly a help.
Are those dollars coming to the state level again, and with hopefully the idea of using the same kind of formula that was used to distribute the dollars that you worked on in particular?
So what we did was, it doesn't come to the state, it comes to us directly from the national settlement. The state gets 15% and the counties get 85%. But yes, we're hoping to follow the same or very similar model as we did before.
Well, if it's coming to us, why does the state get any in these new drug dollars?
So the state was involved with the Attorney General bringing actions, and in most states, the Attorney General, Department of Justice gets 50%, and so the state does get the 15%. But a lot of states, all the money goes to the state.
Yeah,
and
I
then
agree. I know, which we are very fortunate. Thanks,
'cause otherwise
thanks to your good work on that, we're fortunate.
Yeah, because otherwise it would have probably gone into the LME-MCO system, right? Because
Probably. Well, maybe, probably. I don't know. Who knows?
yeah, that's really their behavioral health service delivery mechanism, and so by
there was talk of that in the year 2020. The Department of Justice people came to the county attorneys conference, and they were very hopeful about this whole thing, and they said, and we're going to help you all out by directing a lot of this money to the LME MCOs, and everybody booed. So that didn't go over too well.
yeah, that's good
Understand that. Got it. That's helpful. That's a lot of
Chairman,
information.
Yeah, if I may. Hi, Denise. Thank you again for the report. If it's possible, can you share it with us, if you don't mind, the PowerPoint? That's great. And then my other question was relative to, it went so fast, the study, which did not include Black, but it had Brown in it. Do you know why there were no minority African Americans responding in that survey?
I don't know. We did do some very intentional outreach. I will tell you that there were times when, like, we ask if you identify as an individual with lived experience, where that answer might be no. But in the comment section, it talked about a use experience. Okay. So validity-wise, I don't know how accurate it is. It was largely not with people where we saw discrepancies, with people that work in the field or just live in Forsyth County. It was people with lived experience. That was a number that was also very, very low in terms of the numbers of people that gave us feedback identifying that way. But when I looked at those narratives, it was a whole lot higher.
Okay, all right. Yeah, I just think it's important, when we're talking about these types of opportunities, that everybody has a say in their responses to whatever. But hopefully the next time we can just do a little bit more in terms of the intentionality.
And you'll see when you look at this that in every group that we talked about, racial disparities was a topic. So.
Sure. Thanks, Denise.
Yes, absolutely.
If I could take 30 seconds and I'll be finished. I responded to the survey when it was online on the county website, and I forwarded that to some groups that I know had some African-American memberships. And I'm disappointed they didn't respond in more numbers. Of course, I'll make an inquiry over the weekend and maybe take out my pervasive sword, pencil that is, to convince them to be more active. Thank you again, Denise.
Thank you. Thank you.
all right. That is it for the December 1st meeting, and we just happy Thanksgiving next Thursday.
Can I have a point of privilege, please, sir? Just before
Any further comments?
Before we adjourn, I want to recognize our Commissioner-elect, Dan Bessie, who's in the audience here, and you're welcome to the chamber. She'll be sitting here very soon.
Dan Bessie's in the room, and we haven't heard a thing? Good. Commissioner Kaplan.
We adjourn.
Commissioner Kaplan says he wants to adjourn. I will second the motion. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Well, let me ask you two quick questions.